more important today. Very good. Is there a motion on the clerk general?
So moved.
Second?
And yes.
And have you had an opportunity to review the requisitions?
I'm
Yes.
fine with them.
Me too.
Yes.
And I do have 2 items for consideration, not on the consent agenda. The first resolution is accepting transfer and conveyance of unused real estate owned by the Deerfield Board of Trustees.
They're giving us something?
They're giving us land down by the Foster lift station that they did not use and we need for that project.
Okay. So moved to accept that.
Second?
And yes.
And the second resolution is approving the appointment of Ms. Michelle Tegmeyer to the position of Deputy Director of Facilities Management.
So moved.
Second.
Yes.
And I have 2 add-ons. I have a resolution approving an appropriation adjustment within Mary Haven Fund 2270.
So moved.
Second.
Yes.
And the second add-on is approving an appropriation adjustment within Coroner's Fund 11012100.
So moved.
Second.
Yes.
And that's all I have.
Very good. First, we've got an annexation issue.
This is a mandatory annexation filed by a municipality for municipal property. You are required to approve it.
All right. So moved.
Second?
Roll call.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Grossman?
Yes.
Very good. Now that we've caught up officially, we'll go ahead and be a minute early if we've got everyone here that's party to this. We've got a work session with the esteemed prosecutor, Mr. Fornshell, Sheriff Sims. Good morning.
Morning.
You guys have your folks here. We can go ahead and start this.
Thank you again for the opportunity to come over and speak in relation to this particular issue, which is the Child Advocacy Center of Warren County. I think the last time that we met on this particular issue was back in June. This relates to our desire, and by our I mean effectively the steering committee of the CAC, the relevant players, myself and Sheriff Sims being the 2 that have come to you to make this request that effectively the CAC be organized under the Board of County Commissioners. When we met last time, I went through the history of the CAC, how it started, the intent that this was never going to be a situation where we would be under the umbrella, if you will, of Dayton Children's for the entirety of the CAC's existence, but rather that was something that was done at the beginning since they had experience in operating CACs. At this point in time, we're 16 years down the line. I think we've got a pretty good idea of how to operate the CAC and have a pretty good idea of how to operate in the best interest of Warren County. Now, since we last met, what we were tasked with doing by this Board of Commissioners at that point in time was to try to determine the financial impact on the county by moving the financial operations, if you will, of the CAC under the county as compared to being under Dayton Children's Hospital. And it's not honestly been an easy task to figure that out. That in part is why we wanted to move this to begin with, and it's only been borne out further in us attempting to get this information to you. Coming back to you today, we're effectively the same place I think that we were 4 or 5 months ago when we were before you, which is that when you look at the financial impact on the county, it still comes down to the addition of the fringe benefits, retirement, things that of the like, that up until 4 months ago, we believed that Dayton Children's was actually covering for the CAC. In the last week or so, and I don't want to necessarily go down this rabbit hole, but in the last week or so, it has become apparent that Dayton Children's is not believe it has to provide those information, those expenses, and provided that information to us within the past week. And so effectively, those funds were coming out of the CAC all along, if you look at it from Dayton Children's perspective. So again, from the standpoint of the Warren County Board of County Commissioners, that still is the dollar figure that we're talking about, and I think that the Deputy County Administrator has provided that information to the Board of County Commissioners. At this point, what we are asking this board to do is to authorize us to go ahead and execute the documents necessary to bring the operations under the Board of County Commissioners. That would bring the existing employees of the CAC under the auspices of the county commissioners. There would be some additional, obviously, legal documents that would have to be executed, a new MOU. There would have to be grants that would be transferred from the Dayton Children's as the fiscal agent to the Board of County Commissioners. Adam Nice, who is, is my chief of my civil division, has come up with a kind of an itemized list of things that we need to do from a legal standpoint to try to make this transfer happen. But that's what we are requesting that you do today. Sheriff Sims, is there anything that you want to add?
Probably not, just that, I guess I should share this, most of you know this, I mean, this is tough for me in a way, not that this transition shouldn't happen, because I believe this is the way it should have always been and was intended to be from the time that Rachel Hutzel and Vicki Jambrone brought this together. And it's been a while getting here, but how we got here is a little difficult for me. And so, not getting down into the weeds, but there's been a lot of people working hard for many years, including Dayton Children's, to build this center. And these last few weeks, seeing this information coming out of our partner Dayton Children's is disheartening. But all that being said, and I don't know that anybody wants to get into those weeds, this is a very important move for the county, for the center, and hopefully in the long run, Dayton Children's. I'd like to think that we could salvage that relationship going forward, but that's yet to be said. But I agree 100% with the prosecutor, and that if we can legally make this transition, it will make us a stronger group of people going forward operating this center. So, and if anybody has any questions, I certainly would be glad to answer. Historically, I think I'm probably one of the few that's left that has been involved in this at the very beginning, and it's time to move forward. So,
Do you have any questions of us?
I do not. We appreciate your guidance on this. Yeah, I remember I was there at the beginning with when Rachel brought the idea, and we were so supportive of it. It made just so much sense, mainly for the victims, the kids in the county. That's who this was really all about, and trying to, make sure that justice was served in a very efficient manner, and take this very, very seriously, because these are as tough a things as you see. And so we have to do this right. And as you said, county's been doing this for 16 years now. And the steering committee is fully dedicated. They know what they're doing. Obviously, law enforcement and the prosecutors, who in many parts of this state and around the country don't work well together, you all do work well together, especially on this matter. So when you are the ones that are the elected officials that are really leading this effort, are saying this is a better path forward, at least from my perspective, take that very seriously and wholeheartedly support what you're going to attempt to accomplish. And so from my perspective, full steam ahead.
I also want to say, just from the standpoint of the CAC and this commission's historic support of it, when you go back and you look, and I can't remember exactly what year it was around, I would say 2016, 2017, when we moved the facility from the Dayton Children's location over by Atrium to here in Lebanon. That investment by this commission in terms of allowing us to use that space and ultimately leasing that space to the CAC for $1, the return on that investment, the increase in the number of kids that we're seeing at the CAC from 2016 timeframe, let's just use that, where it was in the, I would say, low 100s to in the past few years where we've averaged over 400 children seen at the CAC coming in and being forensically interviewed, has been huge. And so we have, I think it demonstrates that the more that our county has been involved in the CAC, the bang for our buck that we've received has just been tremendous. It has exploded, and it's not because child abuse in the county has been exploding. It's because it really felt like it became more our center, and we got more buy-in from our community partners, from our law enforcement agencies. It was much simpler for the people that we serve as opposed to having to go to the northwest part of the county to be here in the middle of the county, in the county seat. And so we've seen tremendous growth, and that is, in my opinion, there's a couple of factors. One, I think we had good leadership during that time period. But secondarily, I think we also benefited greatly from what this commission did in terms of its investment. So I look forward to that continuing and us continuing to be able to serve these children. I guess the next question I would have for you is, from our perspective, we are ready to proceed with obviously these types of negotiations, for lack of a better word, but we're going to have to work with Dayton Children's in order to transfer funds, to negotiate what that amount's going to be, to execute the documents. So at some point in the very near future, our goal would be to have this done by January 1, so that we have kind of a clean fiscal timeline, so to speak. So that's what we're here requesting today. I know that's going to have to be done by resolution of this commission, but I would be interested in hearing your input on that and the timing of that.
So what is the cost to the county if we make this transition?
From the financials we have from Dayton Children's, and then I ran the benefits just through our county, I would estimate it's probably gonna be about $200,000, but it could be more. It's really hard to tell, because a lot of it's dependent upon funding, grants, what's been applied for, what grants are available. If we do the benefit again with the gala, as far as to get fundraising, it's just gonna be dependent. It's really hard to tell, but I would say average is probably about $200,000.
Are we allowed, if we control this, are we allowed to fundraise?
So the mechanism through which that would be done would be through the Warren County Foundation. And I've had just some preliminary conversations with the Warren County Foundation. So the sheriff, do you do something for your folks through the foundation? Or do you have a 501c3? Is there something that you all do for benefiting your officers? There are organizations, there are government organizations. You can take donations. And so the idea would be to set something up through the foundation to be able to do the benefit. So the benefit would effectively be done outside, if you will, the auspices of the county auditor's office, but then it would be for the benefit of the CAC of Warren County. And so it would just be a function of this commission accepting a donation from that 501c3 to offset the expenses of the CAC of Warren County. So that's how that would be structured.
Yeah, there's a charitable organization right
Yeah.
now that gives to law enforcement and fire, if I'm not.
We do receive funds. We
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
actively.
Yeah,
do
yeah,
the
I'm sorry,
fundraising,
I meant
but
you received the funds.
yes, we do receive
yes.
contributions, yes.
So it would be done, it would be structured similar to that.
And if we are not to do this, what happens?
You lose out on about $40,000. So it would be, that is something that typically raises nets around $40,000 a year, the fundraiser does.
No, that's not my question.
Okay.
If we weren't to approve our taking this over, what happens?
That's a good question, Commissioner Grossman, because Dayton Children's has presented to us a modified MOU, which at this point, I would find it hard to believe that any members of the steering committee would be willing to accept. We were unwilling to accept it back in June, and based on information that's come out in the last 4 months, those sentiments have only become stronger. And so we would, I mean, in all likelihood, we would have to go out and find a new medical partner in order for the CAC to be accredited.
And if
We just have a fundamental, there's just no way that we can continue with Dayton Children's as the fiscal agent. We cannot. It is not in the best interest of the CAC of Warren County. And I think, we have 2 board members here today as well. Megan Manuel, who you know as the director of DD for the county. Amy Fornshell, who was the previous manager of the CAC for 8 years and currently is the executive director of the Mental Health and Recovery Board. I think they would agree with me that the current arrangement is just, it cannot continue any longer. It's not financially feasible, particularly with Dayton Children's advising us now what they intend to charge us for operational expenses. It's just not, it's not feasible. And so we would have to find in my opinion, we'd probably have to find a different medical partner.
I would just like to add, since you asked that question, I would like to think the current committee members would agree with this. For years, since 2008, we as a steering committee member have always understood where the partners lied in our total expenses, revenues, how that center operates. Operating with the building of a cash reserve, if you will, all with the intention of sustainability for this center in the future, with trying to come out and be on our own eventually, right? And so for every meeting, you would see that cash reserve grow for a combination of reasons. Fundraising was a large part of that. So in most recent reports, you're talking about well over $400,000 that every steering committee member was under the impression that was operational funds if needed for the center, right? And that's a report that we've gotten 4 times a year, being led by the director employed by Dayton Children's and a member of Dayton Children's Hospital who agreed with this. In the most recent email, Dayton Children's, this wording is basically, the reports you've been getting is to be used to manage the cost center and operate in a fiduciary manner. That's the report he's talking about we would get. It does not represent all the costs of each department. So now they're adding cost that they're going to take away from those funds. Never in all these years has anybody been under the impression that those monies would ever be used or taken by Dayton Children's. The best example I can give you is we went, can't remember how many years ago, we went and explored DD building that had the intentions of maybe moving the center there because of the growth, right? Dayton Children's came along to help explore that. The intention was we could use some of those funds. Well, that wouldn't even be possible if Dayton Children's all along was planning on recouping some of their expenses that they are now reporting. And I'm really not trying to bash Dayton Children's, but this whole series of emails and situation over these last few months has really made it very, very difficult, if not possible, to sustain an ongoing relationship going forward. If we don't get an agreement here, then the prosecutor's right. We're going to have to, in a rather quick fashion, go explore how we get this up and running under another partnership. And that's with certainly all due respect, but there's ample examples and documentation to show that this money was being raised and built up to continue the operation of the Warren County Child Advocacy Center. Not to fulfill the partners. I mean, we spend $250,000 a year for our child abuse investigators that are dedicated to that center. Never once would we have ever thought, yeah, you know what, we want to dip into those reserves to help pay back some of the monies that we expend. And it's just not, it's never been that way, never had the intention, and it's probably, you guys are the legal mind, it's probably the best example of you probably need a contract or something in writing for as people and leadership change so that there's some guidelines to protect yourself going forward, so.
I mean, we do have, at least in the time that I've been prosecutor, we have 13 years worth of financials where it was represented that these were our funds. And all of that was everybody's understanding for 13 years until a couple weeks ago. And in which case, we were advised, no, those aren't your funds. We're gonna go back several years, and all the things that we had advised you that we were providing to you as our contribution to the center, just like the sheriff's office provides staffing as contribution to the center, just as our office provides contributions to the center, just as Children's Services provides contributions to the center. We're not going back and trying to back charge the center for all of that. That is what is now happening. And so I think that's, you know, when we've had 13 years of financials saying that was not happening, and then a week ago it's described to us as a miscommunication, I think there's a fundamental breakdown in trust in terms of the fiscal side of this. Setting that aside, we've never had an issue on the core function that Dayton Children serves, which is the treatment of the children. And that's, you know, a strength of theirs, obviously. That's why they're in the business that they're in, obviously. And so it's not a situation where any of this is meant to in any way disparage them, you know, in that regard. I don't want to give that impression at all today. But from a financial side, there has been a significant breach of trust. And so we, I think, as a steering committee, or at least the core members, I should clarify, the core members of the steering committee, the ones that are required for accreditation to be a part of this, we do not believe we can continue with this relationship at all for various reasons. Number one, because it's time for us to have operational control, us being the county, to have operational control, Warren County, of this facility. But secondarily, this most recent issue just demonstrates that we can't, we just don't have trust on the fiscal side, and so we need to figure out a different arrangement.
And the bottom line is, even though we're estimating it could be $200,000-ish, we don't know what the fiscal picture looks like moving forward on the operation. It could be a net increase of $200,000 it costs us anyway.
Yeah.
To remain as is.
100%, for sure, and it could get better. I mean, one thing that has happened the last few years is that the state of Ohio has recognized how critical these CACs are in terms of dealing with child abuse in our communities. And so we have, over the last few years, seen substantial increases in the commitment and the funds from the state of Ohio, from the legislature, towards CACs. And that was being shown as an increase in our cash reserves, we thought. And so we were getting these additional funds and getting ourselves to the point to where we thought the goal for this CAC has always been an independent, standalone. You know, when we look at some of the other facilities that are around the state, facility, I know we're in the master facilities plan, the CAC is for the county, and that would be great as well. But in the interim, we had looked at different properties to be able to kind of go out on our own and have a freestanding facility like Michael's House, like Care House in Montgomery County. And so we were developing those cash reserves, and that was one of the reasons that this initial conversation happened, was me broaching the subject of, hey, we've got $500,000 almost in cash reserves. We need to be moving at least some of those funds over into a capital fund, earning some money on that, as opposed to it just sitting in a checking account somewhere. to be able to raise some funds on those funds that we're able to have in our cash reserves. And that's kind of how this whole thing started spiraling, in all honesty, was when those questions started getting asked of what earnings are being made on those cash reserves. And then we ended up to kind of where we are today. So again, I think to answer Commissioner Grossman's question, it's a good question. There's not a great answer to that question, other than, it puts us in a significant, it would substantially hamper our ability to serve the children of Warren County. That's the answer to your question. What happens if you don't do this? There's a lot of children that go unserved.
All right, and if we do this today, do you not need a medical provider? And are you going to stay with the same medical provider? Are you going to switch if we do this?
The intent would be to stay with Dayton Children's. That the intent would, assuming that they want to stay with us, and they've indicated all along that they want to do that. And so, and they understand our frustration. I'm not saying anything out of school here that I haven't said to Dayton Children's personnel. So, but the intent would be for them to continue to serve as the medical provider for the CAC. There are some differences in terms of the way that they would do it under this type of arrangement versus how they would do it if they had full operational control over the facility. But from our perspective, it's not going to fundamentally, those changes aren't going to fundamentally alter the service to the children of the county.
Yeah, I mean, you were looking for direction. I would say continue to work with our staff, namely Susan, who this is her bailiwick. She's very familiar with all these operations and the financial picture moving forward. You're saying working it out. I would say continue working with her, representing the board, and from my perspective, yeah, full steam ahead.
Okay. Bruce, is there anything in terms of legislatively that we need to do in the near term in order to give the partners an indication that the commissioners intend to move forward with this?
Standard practice is they give direction as they've just done, and then when Adam completes what he needs to do, he will put together a resolution for them to take legislative action.
All right, we'll do that. Thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Very good. Exactly on schedule. What do we have here for subdivision regulations? We have a public hearing.
Good morning, Commissioners. Excuse me. Be able to flip the screen over? Good morning. My name is Cameron Dushinsky with Warren County RPC, and this morning we'll be going over some proposed text amendments to the Warren County subdivision regulations. Before I begin my presentation, I do just want to note what we are seeking is your approval to adopt these amendments and adopt them actually into the regulations. So let's begin with the Subdivision Review Committee. They reviewed these amendments and gave their recommendations to move forward. Then went on to the RPC Executive Committee for their recommendation, and it is here today for your adoption. I do want to point out as well, before we had the Subdivision Review Committee, we did have a work session for fire apparatus access roads, where we incorporated those comments into these regulations. And predominantly the purpose for these amendments, it's for interpretation and just clerical clarification. That's the bulk of these amendments. We're also amending final plat and preliminary plan approval periods. This conforms with ORC, and redefining earth disturbing activities. So in total, there are 31 amendments that we'll go over. 11 of them are just changing preliminary plat to preliminary plan. This just conforms with ORC, so that's 1/3 of the amendments is just very minor. And there are 4 amendments that are requested by the Warren County Soil and Water Conservation District. So we did invite a representative from Soil and Water to come and speak about these 4 amendments. So I'd like to invite up Justin to come and speak about these briefly.
Good morning.
Morning.
Justin Bedox, Warren County Soil and Water Conservation District. So I'll be presenting here on some of the amendments that we're proposing. So the first one here is the definition of earth disturbing activity. So the current language we have here on page 15 is earth disturbing activity, any dumping, excavating, filling, or other alteration of the earth's surface where natural or man-made ground cover is destroyed and which may result in or contribute to erosion and sediment pollution. So our proposed update to this definition is for earth disturbing activity for Warren County Stormwater Regulations Resolution 20-1623. Earth disturbing activities include any clearing, grading, excavating, grubbing, and or filling or other alteration of the earth's surface where natural or man-made ground cover is destroyed, and which may result in or contribute to erosion and sediment pollution. Earth disturbing for agricultural purposes is exempt from the earth disturbing permit. Another definition here is, this is a new definition, so for Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, also known as SWIP. So this new language we're proposing on page 21, Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, SWIP. The SWIP is a standalone document required by the Warren County Stormwater Regulations and the Construction General Permit for all projects performing earth disturbing activity on 1 acre or more of land. The SWIP describes all of the construction site operators' activities to prevent stormwater contamination, control sedimentation and erosion, and to manage post-construction stormwater runoff to comply with the requirements of the Clean Water Act. So under section 312, regulations governing improvements, the current language on page 36, the subdivider shall submit improvement plans consisting of all construction drawings and specifications for the improvements required for the subdivision. The improvement plans shall be submitted to the Warren County engineer and the Warren County sanitary engineer for review. The improvement plan shall be approved prior to the approval of a final plat for the subdivision.
So all you're doing is just adding that it has to go before you?
Correct. So the proposed language here is that our office also needs to see those plans. This is all part of there's nothing really new here. This is just kind of updating the regulations to meet the current practices and standards of how we operate.
So today, we're already doing that, we just don't have it in there?
We're already doing this work. It's to comply with the EPA MS4 permit, and we need to review those plans, those improvement plans, to look for sediment and erosion control during construction. So that's kind of what our office is looking at. So we need to see like where they're putting roads, utilities, storm sewers. We already get those plans during the review process, and we work with the county engineer's office. They look at the post-construction stormwater design, so we kind of share plans that way. So we're just trying to update the regulations to reflect the current work that we're doing to comply with the EPA permit.
So nothing, I mean, from a practical standpoint, there's nothing that the home builder folks or whatever would say, oh, this is crazy, don't do this, because we're always leery to, change things that, unintended consequences down the road of, yeah, we're all trying to protect things, but it's also, we don't want to be burdensome to people in that business potentially.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for the building community, but this is kind of standard practice of how we look at these plans already, and it's really the end goal is to kind of protect the homeowner and for post-construction and things like that, make sure things are being built properly and up to stormwater regulations.
But for the most part, this is the way we're already doing business.
Correct.
It's just you're putting it into our rules and regulations a little clearer.
Yes.
Is that a safe characterization, Bruce?
Yeah, are there more? Are there more slides?
Yeah, I think there's one more.
Can you just give us a summary of it instead of reading it?
Sure. So this is the current language on, again, regulations governing improvements. This is so it talks about what's kind of required during this review process for an earth disturbing permit. And we're just kind of getting more descriptive with the proposed language on the different pieces and parts that go into an earth disturbing permit.
So you have your stormwater pollution prevention plan. That's under the Ohio EPA permit, the NPDES permit. You need the notice of intent. So I think just to be more clear, we have issues sometimes when construction projects will start grading a site prior to receiving that earth disturbing permit approval from us. And then we're kind of trying to catch up after the fact and bring them into compliance. And so I think maybe this will help to get that word out there more, that you need this permit first before you start grading, and there's these different pieces and parts that go into that permit application. Your stormwater pollution prevention plan, notice of intent from Ohio EPA, improvement plans showing your grading and erosion control on the project. So, yeah. There's the application fee for the earth disturbing permit. So these are all things that we currently do, it's just putting it into the, regulations here, updating those.
Who prepared this document? Was it your office or Soil and
The
Water?
subdivision regulations or the PowerPoint itself?
The 252 pages that I'm looking at. Well, that's of our packet, so the 50 pages here.
Oh, that was our office. Yeah, prepared the PowerPoint, yep.
So can I ask that, like, this is the first time I recall seeing it this way, with this blue and red in a way that is inconsistent with, like, it would be really helpful when I was going through and reading this, that new language is red and strike through language is strike through in red, because it was very difficult to read this, to say blue was, you were changing, like, it was making me think this is something that's new, and you're trying to identify something that is changing and is an existing code. I just found, I don't remember seeing it like this before, and this was a very difficult way for me to follow this.
Gotcha.
I don't have a problem with any of it, but
No.
it took me about 3 times as long to understand what the proposal
Yeah,
was.
I should have said, yeah, the current language, what we're removing is in red, the new language is in blue.
I just think it would be better to strike through current language and then insert in red new proposed language, rather than, that was really, this was a difficult way to follow it. That's a dumb thing, but.
Not for soil and water, but we do have more slides to go through.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin. And Commissioner Young, you brought up a good point. We did also present these slides to the Dayton HBA as well, so we got their comments as well on all of these amendments. But we have the rest of these, the PowerPoint broken up by article. So Article 2, there are 3 amendments. First one you just heard from Justin. Also adding a definition for fire apparatus access roads. So this is intended to be, this is taken from the Ohio Fire Code, it's adapted. And it's meant to serve as an emergency access point for emergency vehicles to be able to access the subdivision, essentially serving as a second gated road solely for emergency vehicles. And then here's the stormwater pollution prevention plan Justin just went over. For Article 3, there are 5 amendments. First one is the submission to Director of Transportation. This is just clarifying this section. There's no actual change. It's still conforming with ORC. We're just updating this to clarify when the ODOT would be notified of developments. Section 312, we just heard this from Justin. And same for this one as well. Section 316, this is approval of final plat. So there's a lot of language on here, but we've just broke it down and what the major points are for this change. We're including conditional approval and clarifying that applications will expire. We're amending business days to calendar days and extending the corrections proof copy requirement from 60 days as opposed to 30. Again, this is conforming with ORC, and this is what that actual language will look like. Follows the process that we currently follow in compliance with ORC. Final plat approval period, just identifying that staff is able to grant final plat approval extensions and then outlining what process it would have to go through. pointing to section 801, which we will touch on. For Article 4, there are 5 amendments here. First one, traffic management, G1, we're adding that an access point is required to all existing public roadways that front the subdivision site. We have an example of what that would look like. So here you can see on the screen is Green Tree Meadows, and you can see the yellow line is the Stub Street to the adjacent property, and the orange road there. So if a developer did want to connect that Stub Street or build off of that Stub Street, they would be required to connect to that orange road being Green Tree Road. Here's fire apparatus access roads. So this is the actual regulation itself. So I'll just read a little bit off the screen. 2 fire apparatus access points are required for major subdivisions, which involve the construction extension of public-private streets where the number of dwelling units exceeds 30. Then goes on to read that a public-private roadway constitutes a fire apparatus access road. So with this requirement, any development that has a minimum of 30 lots would be required to have a fire apparatus access road, serving as a secondary access point for emergency vehicles.
Yeah, this has been relevant with the discussion of that proposal in Shaker Run, if I remember correctly.
Correct, yep.
And 30, is that our current number, or?
50 is the current number for a second access point. 30, this is taken from the Ohio Fire Code. They have the 30 minimum. It is also worth noting that we're adding a waiver process. This could be approved by the RPC Executive Committee, but they would be looking at a few certain factors. The first and most important one is the fire code official and review department agency. So if the fire official doesn't think that it's necessary, then the RPC Executive Committee may waive that. Also, there may be issues in terms of natural features that exist on the site as well. And here's just an example of what that could look like, or this is an existing subdivision, so you can see they have residential access off of Columbia Road and then emergency access to State Route 42. And here's just another example as well. For section 405, special street types, this is for marginal access streets. We're just clarifying when marginal access streets may be required. It's up to the determination of the engineer's office based on a traffic impact study, so currently a process we follow.
Before you go on, I
Yeah.
want to ask about this 2 fire access roads.
Yes.
Are these have to be paved roads?
It doesn't have to be just impervious surface. It's up to the construction standards of the Ohio Fire Code.
Okay, so what kind of surface would it have?
It could be gravel. One example that we had was the multi-use path in Green Tree Meadows, where there's an existing path, but they potentially could utilize a portion of that path and take it out to Green Tree Road, so maybe.
So every single subdivision would now have to be, or would have to have 2 completely separate roads accessing from the same road, different roads, or just 2 points of access to any part of a subdivision. So I live in a subdivision off Butler Warren.
Mhm.
There's only one road. So if this were applicable, now it's in Mason, so it doesn't cover that, but if this were applicable, not a single solitary part of that subdivision could have been constructed as it currently is. And I don't know how they would do it, but none of them have 2 access points, not a single solitary part of it.
Mhm.
So, are you aware of how many subdivisions currently exist in Warren County that only have 1 access road?
I'm not aware of the entire number. We do have examples where our current regulations, it's 50. It requires 2 access points for 50, but that can be waived by the RPC Executive Committee.
Is that regularly waived?
It's a case-by-case basis. But this is, an example here is Green Tree Meadows. This is 1 entrance, and it's 198 residential lots.
Yeah, but I think Commissioner Grossman's question is a good one, that you have a 200 home subdivision, and it's got 3 or 4 roads that come off of a major collector road. And each road might have 50 or 60 homes on it. Is this now saying each one of those roads has to have a second
No, so the current regulation, that last sentence, a public or private roadway constitutes a fire apparatus access road. So if there are two entrances to a
No,
subdivision.
no, no, I'm saying, in this example, that Commissioner read,
Yeah.
there's 200 homes in the total subdivision, but there's multiple roads, and it's one street, it doesn't connect everywhere else. It's still part of the same development. One street might have 50 or 60 houses on it, then, you know, quarter mile away, there's another street with 50 or 60 houses on it. They're not connected. So you're saying each one of those streets has to have a second?
This is a case by each subdivision, so I suppose if there were cases where it's one subdivision, but it's not connected in terms of the road network, it would still just be the one fire apparatus access road, even though it's, you know, 4 roads with 50 or 60 units. I'm not sure if.
But see, but then that doesn't make any sense, if the point is, for every, now we're saying as Warren County, every 30 houses,
It's done on a subdivision basis. So it's just, if you have 200 homes, you just have to have 2 access points to that subdivision,
Yeah.
not to each roadway. that's-
What
that's
if a
served.
subdivision, though, so I'm not sure what I understand what a subdivision is here. So I live in a neighborhood or an area that was developed, and they have like separate pods. Like there's a pod that goes, you know, 2 of them that are completely separate. There's only one road off of Butler Warren for each of these pods, one road. And then there's another 3 pods for the same subdivision that go off of Mason Road. So does the way this thing works is every single one of these pods would have to have 2 access points. Even though they're all one subdivision, but they've all got separate like pods going on. And I don't think they could have constructed what they're doing if this was the case. So that's when you get into the waiver, I guess. But is that how this works? So if you've got a subdivision that has different pods off of different roads of the same road, but they've only got one access road to that pod, if that pod itself, does that have to be over, if it's over the numbers, the pod, not the subdivision as a whole, but the pod, does that have to have 2 access points, each one of them? And of course, if you take a look, if I'm looking at this thing and I understand it, you're not gonna give credit to the fact that they've got other pods that are completely separate with different access points. Because what you're really saying, I think, is that if it's any pod of any subdivision that has more houses has to have 2 access points, right? Otherwise, it defeats the entire purpose of this.
No, what we're saying is that, if we look at it on a subdivision wide basis.
Well, okay,
so
but what about the subdivision that I'm talking about?
Not on a pod or not on a phased type basis.
Okay, I'm
So-
confused.
So.
It doesn't make any sense then.
Yeah, you're almost talking me out of it, that it's, okay, a subdivision of 200 houses has 4 streets, call them a pod, just call them 4 separate streets that are coming in off of 2 different roads, okay? We've got
Right.
4 streets off of 2 different roads, and each one of these streets might have 1 or 2 other collector streets on it, and there's 50 or 60 houses on each street, a couple hundred homes in there. What you're saying is, you look at it from an aggregate standpoint, that is one subdivision, and that one subdivision has to have a second entrance somewhere. Is that, I think that's what you just said.
That subdivision would already have its 4 entrances already, but.
But in reality, it
connected.
doesn't, in reality, it doesn't, because there's 50 or 60 homes off of one street, and there's only one street.
Right. We rarely see subdivisions like that. And in that case, probably a variance or a waiver would be acceptable.
Well, why would it be? Because I don't know what the justification for that would be. Because you've got a subdivision that has different pods, different streets going in, only one street, there are more houses on each one of these separate areas, but they're all part of the one planned community. Take the Rivers Crossing off of 48th. they got one entranceway for a whole bunch of houses back in there.
Correct.
One entrance. They'd have to have two entrances, well, according to you. Or take the Heritage Club, where I live. There are 5 different pods. I think at least 4 of them have more homes that are on you, but they all have one entranceway, all just one. So under this, either they have to get a variance, or you're saying actually, because it's all one subdivision and they each have separate roads, it's okay all of a sudden? Because I don't read it that way, or I don't understand it.
It would not, if you had, a subdivision with 4 entrances.
But they don't
So-
connect.
so-
They're not connected.
Even though they're not connected, it would still be considered 4
But see,
separate
that
entrances.
in my mind, that defeats the purpose, so then you're a smaller developer, you have a one small parcel, and it's the exact same number of houses, it's one street coming off of a major road. I have to do it, but the developer across the street that has 200 homes, just because it's the exact same street, except I'm by myself, it's 40 homes over here, and there's 40 homes across the street, but it's part of one submission that they call it, blank subdivision, or whatever the name of it is. One developer has to do it, one doesn't, because, I've got a street next to me that's part of the same subdivision, even though they're not connected, and a fire apparatus cannot go in between these 2 streets, it's part of a bigger subdivision, so therefore it's compliant, because it's got 4 entrances. But each one of those 4 on its own is the exact same thing as the one across the street that's by itself, and it has to have it. See what I mean?
Yeah.
Either we think it's important that every 30 homes has to have a second way into it, or we're like, that's not really practical. We can't impose that. That's where I'm kind of being talked out of it, that, it sounds great, yeah, we want, but then in reality, yeah, I mean, that is, the subdivision has 4 different entrances. Yes, but each one of the streets doesn't connect. It just happens to be called one subdivision.
Right.
Bruce, you understand that?
I think your best example is to go back to the Honorama in Union Township. You had that slide up there. This isn't setting a standard for entrances. This is setting a standard for fire apparatus standards. And if there are more than one entrances, it will meet that criteria. But if there's only one, and this is an example of one, you're all familiar with it, the Homerama development on the Bob Rapp farm there on 42 when you cross the railroad tracks. Their main entrance is off of Columbia Road. It's the only entrance into that subdivision, public entrance. But then they have, as you know, when you pass the railroad tracks, you see that gated area where, right in there where Fred Vonderhaar's farm shop is and stuff on the opposite side of the road.
Right by Marvin's, right?
Yeah, by Marvin. So you see what's, Cameron has highlighted there in red. That would fit this criteria because it is only a fire access, and maybe the residents on that end get to use it as well. But that fits that standard. That standard they're suggesting to you isn't like the 50 minimum. The 50 minimum, or the 50 requires you to have 2 entrances. That's not what this standard is. If you have 2 entrances, it fits it. But all this is requiring is a fire access, apparatus access. So as Cameron mentioned, it could be gravel. It's not.
Right, I get
improved
that,
street.
but it's, you could have this and literally change Columbia over to, 48, and say that's the TPC with a river right behind it, and instead of having, 60 homes or whatever, there's 400 homes back in there, but there's one entrance off of 48. Because you've got schools around it, and the Kroger around it. Where was the other entrance? I don't know that there is one.
Well, I think that is a road, not the entrance to the subdivision. Isn't that Dwyer Road or whatever it's called? Off of 48 is a public road that goes back there. There's other lands back there besides, or there was originally, Roseanne's family-owned property back there, which is Riverbend TPC. And then when you go into Riverbend TPC, of course, our regulation wasn't in place at the time that that was developed, our subdivision regulation of a minimum threshold of 50.
Correct.
Or they would have had to have had 2 entrances. So
And-
that
and-
changed subsequent to that.
And subdivisions designed where you don't have internal connection is very, very unusual. I've never seen any except for one in Hampton Township that was one subdivision with two entrances. And that
Mr.
did not
Boyes,
connect.
is Heatherwood Country Club
Yeah.
like that? They've only got one entrance off of the main drag, and then they got a whole bunch of homes back in there.
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay.
That's the city of Springboro.
Oh, I know it is. I'm just using examples of, that violate this principle. Okay, so did they all do this? I mean, I remember this, because we had to change the zoning to permit this subdivision. You know, and the businesses out there, I remember when they were running their vehicles that one day that we had that view, but did they put in the second entrance because of current regulations?
I think we required that as a second entrance.
And that was a
The commission-
PUD.
And that was a PUD,
Yeah.
yes, correct. The commission did,
And we asked for it.
yes.
Commissioner Grossman, just to answer your question, Heatherwood, I just looked up real quick. They do have an entrance off of 741, but they also have a back entrance off of Red Lion, Five Points.
I mean, but if this is in the regulation, the subdivisions are gonna be submitted to conform with what the regulation is.
Correct.
And the fire code is saying, this is what the contemporary needs are. And so I suspect it will be limited opportunities for even there to be a variance from it unless there's some sort of topography issue that makes it impossible to do it for some reason that might come before us.
That's not you, but the.
RPC.
But you're absolutely right, they just covered the regulation, there's a waiver process, and there's review criteria, and the things you're mentioning are criteria that the executive committee of the RPC could
Could
find
consider.
and grant a waiver.
Let's see, the subdivision in Hampton Township.
I'm not sure.
Of, the circle lots. Okay, sure. Yeah, there's only one that I can think of that, would even, does not have any internal connectivity, and that's because of the street.
What is that?
There's only one subdivision, in my 15 years here that I can think of that have come in that, it's almost like 2 separate subdivisions on one name. But our code, the subdivision code, recommends connectivity, so usually what we see is internal streets provided.
Is
Would it
this,
help if we added a review criteria that included the design, the unique design that,
I mean, I guess I don't understand why we would deviate from what the fire code says. We currently do this for 50 homes, the fire code says 30 homes, you're saying we should conform to what the current fire standard is. I don't know why we wouldn't just conform to what the current fire standard is. It's a difference of 20 homes, people smarter than me in the fire service thinks that that is important. Okay.
And this is less of a burden because our 50 rule relates to entrances that have to be improved under our construction standards. This is requiring a secondary access for fire apparatus that doesn't have to be built to those
The
standards.
standards of the road. So we had that issue down there, near the Racino, isn't there a subdivision that backs up kind of near the Racino where we had. the
Shaker Run.
Shake,
Shaker.
oh, the
That's
back
what
end of
the
Shaker Run,
Encore.
it's so huge, yeah.
Backs into Encore and there was a.
Yeah,
Correct.
yeah.
Yeah, and they were spinning off additional land to develop, and their access was gonna be all the way through Shaker.
Yeah.
And they had no public access other than an internal access.
Yeah.
Is there more to present?
There is, yeah. So we went over special street types, driveways and off-street parking. This is just in regards to updated driveway maintenance agreements. So for any lots which have shared driveway, it just outlines which applications updated maintenance agreement would be required for. Currently a process that we already follow. Stormwater management and maintenance. Stormwater management facilities shall be provided in all new subdivisions and shall be permitted only on open space lots. That'd be for HOA maintenance. Article 7.
Stop there and let the commissioners know that in addition to the public hearing process before the executive committee, which is advertised, this is presented to the HBA. We met with the HBA, meaning RPC staff and I met with the HBA and their legal counsel this past Thursday on that regulation. And we advised them if they wanted to take any exception to that or have any alternate recommendations. This hearing was being held here today. They seem to be receptive to staff's explanation of that one as well. And I don't, there's no one here on behalf of the HBA to present in opposition or to suggest some other option.
On to Article 7, there's just one amendment for this. For the required statements, these are just the statements that are affixed on the plat, just for cases where there is no HOA for maybe a commercial or industrial subdivision, just amending this to the owners association or all lot owners. So this would just be affixed on the plat. And then Article 8, there are 6 amendments. This is the last article we'll go over, so we're just updating the title. And we're clarifying the extension of preliminary plan approval periods. It goes before the executive committee, so just clarifying that. And extension of final plat approval periods. As I mentioned, RPC staff grants those extensions, so this just outlines the process that we currently follow. Just making sure it's listed in the code and it does comply with ORC. Section 802, revision of plat after approval. This outlines the revised preliminary plan process and states that all lot owners within a subdivision would be required to sign for a revised preliminary. Section 803, exchange of lots between recorded subdivisions. So this just outlines a process for lot owners. If you have an adjoining lot adjacent to a subdivision, you would be able to exchange your lot between a recorded subdivision so long as you go through the proper process, being the revised preliminary for both subdivisions and getting the owner's consent of both subdivisions, being all property owners. So we just briefly have a quick example. Hypothetically, if Little Muddy Creek subdivision wanted to incorporate into the Meadowbrook Estate subdivision, being that the Little Muddy Creek actually is a subdivision, granted it's one lot, this would outline a process for them to be able to do so. And then last two, month time computation. This just is taken directly from ORC, just identifying what we're referring to when we are talking about months for 6-month, 12-month extension periods. And then daytime computation, indicating that it's calendar days, not business days, again taken directly from ORC. So that is the entirety of the list of amendments. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have as well.
Hearing none, thank you. What's the pleasure of the board? Wish to act on this matter?
If you would, just put it on the record, you offered the opportunity for the public to comment.
Yeah, it is a public hearing. Anyone else wish to address the board on this?
Okay, I've got a question for the staff quickly. I take it that you passed by all of these amendments to the development community?
Correct, yeah, we presented to the Dayton HBA twice on this, and as Bruce mentioned, we met with Cincinnati HBA as well.
Okay, and did they give you comments that you incorporated or addressed?
Yeah, they reviewed everything. There were really any comments. They understood all
No
of the-
objections from them?
Right, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, in process, if they really objected, they should be here, and that opportunity was granted to them.
Were they notified? of this hearing
Yeah.
today?
Very good. Do we close the public hearing?
Yes.
Motion closed?
So moved,
Yeah, yes.
second.
Okay, I'll move to adopt the amendments that have been proposed today.
Second,
Roll call?
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
yes.
Mr. Grossman?
Yes.
Very good. Any other public business to come before us? We're about to go into executive session. Hearing none, is there a motion to go into executive session?
I move that we go into executive session for personnel matters to consider the dismissal or discipline of a public employee pursuant to ORC 121.22G1.
Second.
Roll call?
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Grossman?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Thank you all.